Welcome to Bake to the Future. We bring you a fresh take on the latest trends and issues impacting the baking sector through exclusive insights and conversations. Brought to you by the American Bakers Association.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Jewell.
And today we are taking you behind the scenes of IBIE 2022 in Las Vegas. That is the International Baking Industry Exposition, the largest trade show for grain-based foods in the Western Hemisphere.
And full disclosure, ABA is co-owner of this huge event, and we're so proud to be part of it, along with BIMA and in partnership with the Retail Bakers Association. That said, it's our distinct honor to have a guiding role in the planning and execution of this enormous gathering. Haley, tell us more about IBIE.
Well, first I'll say that we had another episode in September with the IBIE 2022 Chair and Vice Chair, Dennis Scannell and Jorge Zarate, and I highly recommend that you go back and listen to that one. But for those of you who might not be as familiar with the event, IBIE has more than 22,000 baking professionals from over 100 countries who attended the show in 2019. About 1,000 exhibitors came from the US and from around the globe, and they literally build full production lines on the trade show floor. Attendees also go to IBIE Educate sessions. They participate in baking-related competitions. They see the latest technology, ingredients, and more.
And held every 3 years, the 2022 show will be the place to be. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, will be the largest baking industry trade show since the last IBIE. And it takes a huge team to pull off this big event, and they've been planning it since the conclusion of the last show.
Today, we are going to give our listeners a behind-the-scenes look at what goes into planning such a massive event and more, with the two people who make it all happen. Welcome to our guests, Samantha Moore and Buffy Levy.
Hi, good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Dave, thanks.
Samantha is the Senior Director of Meetings and Education for ABA, and she is the Assistant Secretary of Housing, Transportation, and Catering for IBIE. And Buffy Levy is the Trade Show Director of IBIE and Event Director at Smith Buckland, the firm that is a longtime partner of IBIE. We are so happy to have you all with us.
And we always like to start the show and start the line of questioning before we get a peek behind the curtain of IBIE. Buffy, we'll start with you. What's your favorite baked good?
I think chocolate cream pie.
Solid answer.
You know, there's one of the many reasons why I love Buffy, if I get to answer the same question, is that I'm a big pie enthusiast. And so it just goes to show how connected we are, because I was going to say peach pie. So We'll just visit the Great American Pie Festival at IBIE and have a meeting amongst all the pie.
Oh, the Pie Festival. Oh, so I want to talk about IBIE's details and everything else. So you guys recently were in Las Vegas to boots on the ground, see the space, walk around, I believe, with some exhibitors to learn what it's like on the ground, since a few things have changed since the last one. So let's look behind the scenes. So planning started the day after the 2019 show. What are the conversations there? And how have you seen some of the things that were discussed 3 years ago start to actually happen?
I guess I could take this one. So obviously after 2019, we were coming off such a high. It was our best show to date. We had so many new, really innovative features on the show floor, from our artisan marketplaces to our VR components, and just a really stellar performance on site in terms of the attendees there and the amount of business done on the floor. We went straight into a debrief that November, and then straight into a full-fledged strategic planning session in January of 2020. And we had big ideas. We were really focused on how can we make 2022 the biggest and baddest show. And little did we know that in a little less than 2 months, the world would change. But I think even with all of COVID, we have been able to really stick to our guns on the strategic plan that we set forth and those goals. And I think we're going to be delivering some new features to the show and really just optimizing it for the attendee experience. You mentioned we did the site visit. We were reviewing the brand new West Hall, which debuted in January of 21 as part of the Las Vegas Convention Center campus. It's a beautiful facility, state of the art, and I think our attendees and exhibitors are going to be really happy with the thought that was put into that building design, because it's going to allow our members and our attendees and exhibitors to really connect not only on the show floor, but in other areas.
Add on to that, you guys were kind enough to introduce us as the people that make it happen, but there is a huge team of people from a variety of organizations that are involved in making this happen. So they're, from the day that the last show ended till now, all the way up until the show, there are, 25, 30, 35 people, probably more, that touch this from the IBIE planning perspective. So there's a lot of stuff going on in a lot of different areas in terms of exhibit sales, making up the show floor plan, marketing the show, all the logistics. So it's
sponsorship.
Really, it's a big operation. And we have an awesome, large team that makes it all happen.
I think that brings us to something that I am curious about. After attending for the first time in 2019, I was just struck at how it all kind of came together. And I, helped man the booth at the ABA booth, but I kind of just show up, and it's this huge production, and it's really impressive. So what would you say, what are your main roles that you play at IBIE? Buffy, do you want to start?
Yeah. So as the trade show director, IBIE hires Smith Buckland, the company I work for, to manage really all of the show operations that happen pretty much on the show floor. So we sell all the booth space. We do all the contracting in booth space, collect the payments, et cetera. We do all the booth assignments. We design the floor plan. We work with the general services contractor. They're the ones that actually build the floor and put it all together. They bring in all the freight. They provide labor. They, lay down all the electric, all the internet and water and drain and gas. So our team is really focused on making sure there's a lot of IBIE exhibitors there so that the attendees really get the value out of coming and see the products and innovations that they are interested in learning more about. So we sell those booths, and then we help exhibitors throughout the process between when they sign up to really when they actually leave the building, because there's a lot to do on site as well to make their experience smooth and successful, because setting up a trade show booth can be very stressful. There's about a billion things that can go wrong in terms of freight arriving and trucks not showing up and labor being late and this and that. So we're there to help the exhibitor get up and running and be there for the attendees.
I would say my overall role at IBIE is kind of very comprehensive. And so I think an on-site role for myself is really just kind of making sure that all the different teams at IBIE have what they need from partners and vendors, have what they need from the building. Overseeing essentially any space that's not an exhibit floor is essentially under, I guess, my domain, if you will. Registration, transportation, housing that we have. We have about 35 hotels that we contract with for reduced rates and just for protection of rate. Any of the catering operations, along with Buffy on that one, the corporate meeting program that we have where exhibitors and attendees can essentially rent for free a meeting space at the convention center where they can have meetings with customers or do a sales demo or just have a room to hide out in for an hour. I can set that up with our team. I make sure that the education team has everything they need from an AV perspective and from a building perspective in terms of the room sets and things like that. So it's fairly comprehensive. I'm kind of running around like a crazy person, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's probably one of the best experiences of my job. And I think from a day-to-day operation, Buffy mentioned, all the pre-work that goes into the show. It's really similar. Again, it's just making sure that all of our different teams have what they need from IBIE. They have everything they need from our 10-person committee, which is made up of 5 bakers appointed by ABA's board, and then 5 supplier members that are appointed by the BEMA board. executive team. And, they really are the guiding post or the guiding team that any big decision that is a departure from previous years, we vote on it and we look for guidance from those 10 individuals who represent family to large wholesale bakers, independent bakers, and then from the supplier side, packaging, equipment, ingredient, anything you could really want, we have on that committee. And so every decision we make has their input and has their guidance, which is really unique to our show.
That's what I was wondering. It is unique to the show. And Buffy, I know that you're involved with other shows with Smith Buckland. Like our show, and also 2019 was my first year attending. And so I'm still learning everything that IBIE is. The industry is incredibly involved in this show. And I know that the proceeds from the show all go back to the industry. Is that unique compared to other shows?
I would say, well, in general, for most shows, the proceeds from their events go into sustaining the organization. And IBIE is unique because it is not its own organization. It's owned by two organizations. So potentially IBIE maybe gives more back overall into its industry because of that, whereas most associations, it's their operating, they use it to operate their organization. Another thing actually about IBIE that is pretty different than most events that we're involved in is that for the most part, the members of ABA and BIMA are the exhibitors. And typically when you have a conference or a trade show, the members are the attendees. So it's a little bit reversed. And of course, the attendees are super important and we're wanting to, make sure they're having a great experience. But there's almost like, I think there's a greater emphasis placed on exhibitors than in many other shows because they are the members. So for example, we offer free complimentary lead retrieval to all of our exhibitors. It's part of the booth fee so that they can collect leads from the show. 99.9% of every other trade show out there charges the exhibitor to do lead retrieval and collect leads. So I think that's something different. And I like the way, it gives us opportunity to make the exhibitor experience really great because some shows, the exhibitors aren't always at the forefront of consideration when planning an event.
100% agree. Again, from being a co-owner of the show and ABA having dual membership, both baker and supplier companies, it's obviously vitally important for us. But as the other co-owner, BIMA, the majority of their members are the suppliers to the industry. And, you couldn't really have a show without them. And, you can tell from the support that we've received from our members on the supplier side, just through space selection for the 2022 show, they came in strong. They are ready to get to Vegas, build these amazing booths, which on average were larger than their 2019 booths, which is really exciting. And, IBIE would not be IBIE without them. And so I 100% agree with Buffy that we are extremely unique at the care and consideration that we put towards the exhibitor experience and just making sure they have what they need and can be highly successful because if they're not, we're not, and then the bakers are not. So we're really looking forward to 22 being fantastic and supporting them along the way.
One thing that I think is kind of fun and interesting to think about that goes into the planning of IBIE, which people don't think about, is, well, first of all, security is a big thing. That's a whole, you don't even realize how much security is there in terms of move-in and the show days. But the waste removal. IBIE has a unique need in waste removal in that we need special dumpsters and carts for dough and icing that most shows, that's not a typical need. So there's a lot of cleanup that goes into any show, but when it's a baking show, it's a little bit different. And you got to make sure, and then that dough has to be discarded, once it's in the buckets, how, the big containers, how did they get rid of it off site? So that's just something I wanted to add that's kind of fun that you wouldn't think about, but it's something that has to be planned out ahead of time so that we're good in getting out on time and leaving the building clean the way we received it.
I think another piece to that is, you think, what does IBIE and all the exhibitors do with all that product that's left over? Some is not consumable by humans. And so it goes to different farms in the area, like basically livestock feed. They're getting all kinds of loaves of bread and things like that. So they should be pretty happy. But we do a fairly large donation plan as well, in terms of local food kitchens and local schools getting, equipment or food that was still good and still consumable. We donate that. And when we say we mean the exhibitors. They donate that at the end. And I know other food shows definitely do that. But like Buffy said, we just have a really unique kind of waste/donation plan. And it's unique to food shows, but I think with our stuff, there's a lot that's donated, which is really exciting to see.
That is a fun fact. I don't think I knew that. Thank you for telling us about that. I want to go into a little bit of the details of being an exhibitor and how it might be different this year, but I want to go back to the attendee experience. And so I know the last show, Sam, like before the floor was all the way open and everybody's building their booth still, you did a show and tell with me to kind of make sure that I knew the lay of the land. And we went up to this perch in the central hall, which I know we won't be using this year, but we went up to this perch and we're looking down at all the booths getting built. And you like let out this really big breath of air, like, oh man, I just love this so much. And that energy. And that's the same energy that I think attendees get. So when they walk into the North Hall and I think the new West Hall this year, what sort of things are they going to see? Like what, this is audio. And so, we'll have some pictures to go along with this in the, on the website, but what does that energy feel like as someone either who's been to the show before or a first time attendee? What are they going to feel? What are they going to smell? What are they going to hear? All of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, unlike obviously other food shows probably have a very similar on arrival experience, but I like to think that our show, 5 senses smacks you in the face as soon as that door opens into the show. It doesn't matter what hall you're in. You walk one step onto that beautifully laid just before the doors opened carpet, and you are hit with the hum of machinery. You're hit with the smell of either fresh bread or donuts or, any other baked good you could really imagine. You see all the logos of companies that you know and trust. You see logos of companies that you maybe are not as familiar with and are excited to figure them out. I already said hear, smell. You take a few more steps, you get to taste something. The sampling at our show is out of this world. And we really work with the exhibitors to make sure that they understand that that's really important. And so, like I said, all 5 senses, you're just kind of probably a little bit overwhelmed, to be honest, because there's so much to look at and see and taste and touch. And, all of the exhibitors, they will show you any piece of equipment. If you really want to get into the nitty gritty granule, crawl on the floor and look underneath a piece of machinery, do it. Tell the exhibitor that you want to do that, because they will 100% walk you through it on that level, because they're excited to show what they brought. And I think that's what gets me so excited about IBIE is, I maybe am not crawling on the floor looking at a tunnel oven or looking at, the newest and greatest ingredient that's on display and taste testing. But I am walking around getting to kind of like see all these kids at Christmas, looking at all the newest and greatest things. And it's really fulfilling to see all the hard work of not only just myself, but also this entire team of 2 organizations plus, a massive amount of other organizations and partners, just seeing it happen. It's amazing. It's probably one of the best feelings in the world just for me. And I know that as an attendee walking into that, you probably, it's a top 10 feeling from a work perspective as well.
And if I could add to that, Sam's right. All 5 senses are there. I think the sense that's going to be the most exciting to people is touch, because nobody's been able to touch anything. As Katie mentioned at the beginning, this will be really the first baking show since IBIE 2019. So it's not only actually hands-on touching the equipment, but it's hugging a friend, it's hugging a colleague. I think that is really, I mean, I'm like smiling as I'm speaking about this because I'm seeing just people light up from being together again. So to me, that's really going to take on an even greater impact or factor than the last time. That's what's going to get people just blow their minds, I think, is being together again.
And kind of a similar note, what do you think people will be able to do or see at IBIE 2022 that was different than 2019? Sam, do you want to start?
Sure. So obviously we have a brand new building, which, it's very different than what we've done for probably the last, 10 cycles of IBIE. I know there was 1 year in the last 10 cycles where it went to Orlando. But pretty much every other show, and 10 times 3, the last 30 years has been in the Central and the North Hall. Obviously, we are not in Central this time. And so, I think just the building change and what that is presented to IBIE in terms of some new opportunities to just think of using the space differently. For example, registration is not on the show floor. That allowed us to be able to incorporate more companies onto the show floor and, not take up that prime real estate, which I know was really important to exhibitors and will be really helpful for attendees because they have more companies to explore. I think from our show and other areas, really for the first time ever, IBIE is putting together some pavilions. We've done some international pavilions in the past, but we've never done pavilions in actual, process of baking. And so we'll actually have 2. We'll have sanitation pavilion in the West Hall, and then the kind of business of cannabis, not necessarily the tasting or indulging in cannabis baking, but more of like, how do you go about getting into the cannabis baking markets. We will have a pavilion dedicated to that in the North Hall.
Awesome. And I know that we have a little pre-read, pre-listens on both of those topics. Actually, at the beginning of 2021, we had an episode on this podcast with BNP's editor and cannabis baker about the business of cannabis. And then more recently, we had a sanitation design person come on and talk about that. So, a little pitch for some other episodes that can help people prep for these very special pavilions.
We're really excited about those. We think those are going to be a really nice new addition. I think sanitation's been there before. We've had a presence, obviously, not so much as, in the business of cannabis. So that's really going to be new.
And I think what's unique about how we determined what those pavilions were going to be, it wasn't just, some of us sitting in a dark room, it's like, oh, what do the bakers want to see? And we just kind of like picked them, is that we had this really robust list and we kind of went through rounds and rounds of like yay and nays, pros and cons. And it really came down to is we leaned on those 5 baker committee members and said, if you're going to send, your team, and we had 2 pavilions, which of these 5 topics that we've narrowed it down to, and here are the pluses and minuses of both, which one of these would you be like, yes, that's what I want to see. I want to be able to explore these topics in more depth in a concentration on the floor. Overwhelmingly sanitation and overwhelmingly business of cannabis, because obviously with sanitation, the COVID made it ever more important. But then also just with workforce issues, how can you streamline sanitation? How can you protect your employees, your company, your products, and most importantly, I think your consumer, and just making sure that, the products that are going out are safe, that sanitation is number one. And then I think obviously anything to do with cannabis is certainly very buzzy, no pun intended there. But it definitely is just something that people don't maybe understand fully or have a misconception about. And that's why we really wanted to make sure that pavilion was not really, taste testing and, that kind of thing, but more of what does it take to do a operation that has cannabis byproduct in your product. There's security, there is labor things that go into that are very different from normal production of a baked good. Ingredient handling, storage, all of it is just so different. And so we wanted to really make sure that we highlight it and provide it really good content. So that way our bakers and our attendees can walk away from our show feeling like they understand it a little bit more and are maybe a little bit more comfortable in reaching out and how to start it themselves. Which I think for the baking industry is probably one of the biggest growth areas potentially in the next probably 10 years for them.
Cool. As we start to wrap up, I want to talk about two things. One is the kind of the logistics of being an exhibitor this time and the logistics of being an attendee, given all of the challenges with the supply chain and ships and everything else. And then also from a COVID-19 safety strategy. I want to talk first about getting in the weeds about some of the details of how these exhibitors get these huge pieces of equipment, oftentimes from Europe and Asia. And so kind of, Buffy, what are you telling exhibitors this time as some best practices for making sure that their stuff gets to the Las Vegas Convention Center in time?
Well, I think, Katie, it's a little early to even necessarily be giving advice to exhibitors, because I think there's still, just like with COVID, like things, change. The supply chain, I know that issue is not expected to improve immediately. But I think what we'll plan to do is we'll do educational webinars with our exhibitors, and we'll include our international freight forwarder, Rocket Cargo, because they're really, they're the experts in this. That's why we use them. They know how to bring in freight. They know what's happening at the docks. And we'll include Freeman, which is our material handling, our general services contractor. They actually bring in the freight from the loading docks. So we will absolutely be focused on this because it is essential, not just, internationally, but even, within the United States, getting it across the country may be hard, as they're saying, we have so many fewer truck drivers, et cetera. So we haven't quite focused on it just yet, but it is definitely something that we will spend a good amount of time providing education to our exhibitors. We have an exhibitor briefing January 24th in Las Vegas. And again, even in January, it still may be a little early to talk about it, but we'll certainly have it on the agenda to acknowledge that could be a challenge and that exhibitors really need to start thinking maybe sooner than they used to. And actually, you bring up a good point that perhaps I should have the freight.
I was just thinking that
agenda for the briefing. That's really, actually, you just gave me a great idea. So thank you. But yeah, it's hopefully it's going to be better, but absolutely we cannot plan for that. We have to expect that we're going to have some kind of challenges, and we will bring in our experts on our team to help with that.
And Sam, is it the same sort of TBD, seeing how things go with COVID for attendee safety protocols?
100%. Everyone has been watching with bated breath with other shows of similar size and what they've done this year, if they even had it. As we've mentioned a couple times, that we're really one of the biggest shows to happen since before COVID. And that there haven't been a whole lot of shows that have happened since COVID. And so, yeah, it's definitely too early to tell what our planning and safety measures will be for COVID come next September, because who knows what COVID looks like. But you can be guaranteed that, we will be following all the local, state, federal guidelines, taking into consideration what those rules are and what those recommendations are. Obviously, the facilities in general for any event that you go to now post-COVID, every facility has taken huge strides into how can we make the facility not part of the problem? And so Las Vegas Convention Center, right out the gate, they got GBAC certified. Basically that certification is a internationally recognized certification, very much like a Energy Star or LEED certification for a building. But this is all goes into the cleanliness and sanitation of a building. So, touch points are made with antimicrobial finishes. So, for example, all the handles, door handles at the convention center, this was new. They're lined with copper that doesn't, contribute to I can't say it. It doesn't allow for icky things to be transferred. And so, again, the building has taken huge strides in making things, touchless. And if you do have to touch it, making sure it's out of a material that is easily to clean, if not, can do it itself. And they've increased the frequency of cleaning those surfaces, which I know, there's some things with COVID about surfaces and things like that. But I think just in general, having the facilities be cleaner, that's really nice to hear. So I think that's definitely one thing to count on. But as I said, we will definitely be sending out our official, COVID policy. Even if we don't have to, we'll probably still put out something just so all of our attendees feel safe and secure. Just to circle back to what Buffy was saying about the exhibitors is that I will say, with my role, I get to talk with a lot of members on a daily basis. And from the suppliers that I've talked to, they're thinking about this. They're concerned about this. Some companies have already ordered the equipment from Europe, from Asia, and having it delivered to their U.S. office just to sit there for the next 8 months, because they just don't want to be caught with something in a container before the show. So, I think, as Buffy said, it's not something that we're going to immediately address, but, definitely starting in January, is that all of our exhibitors and even IBIE freight, we all need to take that in consideration. And, how do we get it over here earlier and just let it hang out for a bit until we ship it domestically over to Las Vegas?
I'll just add, as a Smith Buckland employee working with other events, typically our best practice that we've implemented for COVID is we do an initial COVID, health and safety plan at 90 days out with a key team that's involved in putting that together. Then we revise it again at 60 days out. Then we revise it again at 30 days out. And then if there are any, final revisions right before the event, we'll do that. So that it's we don't wait till the last minute, but we update it all the way to the last minute because things change.
Speaking of things changing, as we wrap up, we want to look to the future, as we like to do on this podcast. So I'm going to put you all on the spot and see if you all could describe the future of IBIE in either one word or a couple words.
More products. And I'd like to explain why, but you only want rapid fire, but I think more product for attendees to look at.
I am not a person of little words.
Yeah.
This is a very difficult question for me. I think innovation, I know that's cliche, but I think innovation in all things, attendee experience, equipment, ingredient, process, blockchain, AI, workforce, just innovation and all those things.
Okay, now we have to circle
back.
Can
I expand on my rapid fire question? Because it's so boring the way I said it.
I can tell you guys are struggling. You're like, but I want to say more.
This wasn't in the pre-reads.
So
that's what makes it more
fun.
One
thing that is so awesome about IBIE that we implemented in 19 is, and an attendee wouldn't really know any of this stuff, but exhibitors obviously ship their freight to Las Vegas. And then they have to pay the general services contractor, which is Freeman, to bring it in from the dock to the booth and then bring it back out to the dock on the way out. And that costs money. So what IBIE did in 19 was we included all the costs for that, moving the freight from the dock to the booth and then back to the dock on the way out. We included that in the booth price. And we said, you can ship as much product as you want, and you've paid for it already in your booth space. And the goal of that was to encourage exhibitors to bring more, because they didn't have to worry about spending more. I mean, obviously, if they bought more space, it would cost more to have space for that. But they didn't have to worry about their bill at the end of the show of how much freight they brought in. So that would mean lots more product on the show floor. That would mean much more for attendees to see. That would mean attendees would have such a great experience at the show and continue to come back. So in 19, we actually had over 600,000 pounds of additional freight products that were on display from the previous show. That's a lot. I think we have total of maybe 7 million pounds. So we were up like almost 10% in what was being shown on the show floor. And we've done something for the 22 show to make it even easier to encourage more products. So I just think we are going to continue to grow and have more product, more stuff on the floor that the attendees want to see. And that is super exciting because when they come, they're going to get everything and then some that they wanted out of the show. So more product, because we are really encouraging it and making it more realistic for exhibitors to bring more at a reasonable price.
And I think a big piece of that, and I mentioned it earlier about the business done on the floor, is that this is probably true to a lot of shows, but at IBIE, obviously equipment folks have an easier time of this, but any equipment that's on the floor is either sold at IBIE and it actually it goes straight to a bakery. It doesn't actually go back to that exhibitor's like home destination. It actually ships to a bakery from Vegas, from the show floor. Which is really interesting. Or it was a piece of equipment already sold, but, is being displayed. And so the business of doing business at IBIE is very high. That equipment is sold on the spot. Ingredient orders are done on the spot. I think it's not just like, oh, let's look at this and evaluate it and then maybe think about it later. Obviously, there's a lot of that going on, but there's actually a lot of money exchanged. And I think, again, it's probably not unique to us, but I like to think that it is, and that, again, you can crawl on the floor and bring your engineering team and really look at something from a holistic perspective and seeing it tied into other pieces of equipment that you maybe already have. That's really neat. And I think, again, making it easier for our suppliers and our exhibitors to bring those things and physically turn them on or display them, bake with them, if it's an ingredient or something like that, that's vital. And that's, I think, what basically IBIE is here for, is to make those types of connections and those sales.
Awesome. Well, I think that was very comprehensive. And I really learned a lot from this. And I think it's really interesting just to have that window behind what makes it all happen. And we got some fun facts and some behind the scenes insider info. So thank you both so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. It was fun.
Thanks.
It gets me all excited thinking about all that we're doing. So yeah, this was fun.
Can I put a shameless plug? If any exhibitor is listening, please come to Vegas. It's one half day on the 24th of January, 2022. At the West Hall, we're going to have tours of the building. You'll get to walk into the halls. You'll get to see the new space. We're going to have all the different vendors, such as Freeman, who's our general service contractor. We'll have catering there. We'll have sponsorship and education. I'll be helping you get hotel rooms. So it's just, you can't miss it. And I know even for the storied, well-experienced trade show organizer from an exhibitor company is probably like, I don't need it. But again, let's go tour this new beautiful building and see how it connects to the North Hall and how easy and seamless that is. Because I think that will really get you excited for your booth in September. So please reach out to us if you want to go.
Awesome. And let us know what you thought of the show by emailing hello@americanbakers.org or leave us a voicemail at baketothefuture.org. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, or Ghana.
Bake to the Future is brought to you by the American Bakers Association in partnership with Human Factor. To hear upcoming and past episodes, go to baketothefuture.org. Bake to the Future is produced by Haley Blumenreich. Audio engineer is Blake Alton.